I'll do the canvas one first. So we'll just lift these off carefully. Hi guys, I'm John and welcome to my channel. For this spray paint art video I'm going to be doing glossy paper versus canvas. So the glossy paper I'm going to be using is this, and it's double-sided glossy paper and it's 280 grams per square metre. And the canvas I'm going to be using is this, which is a stretch canvas and 380 grams per square metre. They are both A3 in size. The spray paint I'm going to be using is Rustoleum Painter's Touch, and the colours I'm going to be using are orange, white, black and cherry red. I'm also going to be using some lid stencils, two different size lid stencils. These are going to be used to make the planet. I'm going to be using a palette knife. This will be used to do the highlights in the painting. I'm going to be using this paint scraper, which is called a decorator's tool. It's just a large paint scraper. I'm going to be using magazine paper to do the texture on the planet and some of the other things in the painting. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get the lid stencils and place them on the canvas where we're going to have a planet, and also do it on the glossy paper as well. So these are going to be identical paintings. Like I said, I'm using a Rustoleum Painter's Touch spray paint. I'm going to be using the stock cap that comes with the cans for this painting. So we'll get some paint and spray around the lid stencils. So I'm going to be doing both at the same time. For the outlines for your planets, put them out of the way for now. Now we're going to fill the outlines in with some colours. First of all, get the orange, spray a bit of orange. I'll do them both at the same time. And then a bit of red. With the canvas you have to spray a bit more down, as the canvas soaks a bit of the paint up at first when you first spray it on. So just adding a bit of colour to this. And a bit of white. And a bit of black. Some white. And some black. So like I said, I'm going to be using magazine paper to do the texture, and all we'll do is just crunch it up a bit so we get some lines in it, and we'll just place it on the paint and give it a light rub, and then peel it back off to produce some texture on your planet. And for the second planet, this one up here, all I'm going to do is fold the magazine paper up like that. I'm just going to place it on. I'm just going to give it a turn to mix the paint up. So there the texture's done on the canvas. So now I'll add some highlights and shadows to it. First of all, we'll add the highlights with the white. So we're just going to press it lighter. So there the highlights. And now the shadowed area, black. So while they're drying, we'll move on to the gloss paper, the glossy paper. So we're doing the same now. So we'll add the colours first. And as you can see, the paint doesn't soak into the glossy paper, because the glossy film on it stops it from soaking into the paper. So add a bit more orange to it. And we'll move on to this one. So now do some white. And some black. So I'll be using magazine paper as well for this. So crunch it up again and place it over the paint where your planet's going to go. and then pull it off. And then we'll get another piece of paper folded already. We're going to do the same on this, just turn it to give you a different texture on your planet. And now we'll do the same highlights and shadows. So highlights, and some shadow. I do find using the Rustoleum paint as such, the paint is a bit thinner than some of the other brands that I've used, but that's alright. Just have to press the cap down a bit lighter when filling in your colours and that, so you don't get a pool of paint and then your paint starts separating and mixing up, so your colours all mix up and look a bit of a mess and it doesn't produce texture. So if you are using a Rustoleum painter's touch or a thin paint, just put a bit less paint down when you're putting your colours down for your planets. So now we've got the highlights and shadows on the planet, on both of them, the canvas and the glossy paper. We're going to have to leave these to dry before placing the lid stencils on, because if you don't leave them to dry and you place your lid stencils on, it'll leave rings on your planets when you take the lid stencils off later. So you could leave these to naturally dry, which will take about 20 minutes depending on the weather where you live. Or you could use something to speed up the process of a drying time. So you could use something like a heat gun or an air dryer or something like that. I'm going to be using a heat gun to speed up the process. So all you have to do if you're going to use a heat gun or an air dryer, it'd be the same thing, is hold it about a foot away from the painting and just constantly move it around the wet paint, so you don't keep it in one spot, because if you keep it in one spot it'll start burning the paint. So we'll just do the canvas first. And also, if you're going to use a heat gun or an air dryer or something like that when you're painting on gloss paper, just don't put too much heat on it, because the glossy paper can start to bend up like that when it gets warm. So just be careful how much heat you put on the paper. So I'll leave that for a minute, because you can see the paper starting to bend a bit. That's because of the heat. So that's almost dry. This one's still wet. It also depends drying time on the paint you're using as well. With a Rustoleum being a bit thinner, it may take a bit longer to dry than say some other paints. With the paint completely dry now, as you can see, I can touch the paint now and it's not sticky, it's all dry now. We can place the lid stencils back on. So I'll put the lid stencils on the canvas first, so make sure you cover a bit of a shadowed area in the highlighted area. So I'll put that one there, like that one there. I'll move over to a glossy paper, like that one there. And that one there. So there are the lid stencils on. And what you could do, you could put some weights on these to hold the lid stencils in place. But if you are going to use some weights, Make sure the paint's completely dry before placing the lid stencil on, because putting weight on top of the lid stencils will push the lid stencils into the paint more. So I think for this video I'm going to use some weights. So the weights I'm going to use are just old door handles. So all you want to do is place them on your lid stencils, just so hold the lid stencil in place. I'm going to put one on this one as well. I'll also put some on this one. So just make sure if you're going to use weights that the paint's completely dry before placing the lid stencils on. So now we have some weights on the lid stencils, and we'll move on to the background. So the background, I'm just going to put a bit of a galaxy between these two planets on each. First I'll get some orange. I'll do the canvas first. So just watch out when you spray next to these lid stencils. You don't spray too heavy, because if you do, it might get some underspray underneath your lid stencils and go onto your planet. So I'll add some cherry red. And a bit of white up the middle. Got a bit more orange. And then we'll cover it in black. Just lightly cover it. Then what we'll do is get a piece of magazine paper. And for this I'm just going to rip it in half so it's a bit thinner. And all we're going to do is crunch it up and then place it onto the sheet. But as you can see, the paint started separating here. There's just a bit too much paint down. So then the paint starts separating like this. But that doesn't really matter when you're doing the background or something like this, because we're taking most of the paint off. So what we'll do is get the magazine paper and just give it a light rub and pull it off to make some texture. We'll do the same up here. Just be a bit careful around your lid stencils when you're doing this so you don't move them. So I'll just get another piece of magazine paper. Just make a bit more in places. So I'll just crunch it up a bit, and I'm just going to dab a bit in places here and there. So I like how that one's looking. So we'll leave that and we'll move on to this one. I'm just going to move this one over a bit so I don't get any overspray from this onto this one. So we'll do the same. Bit of orange. So this time I'm going to press the cap a bit lighter. Let a bit less paint out. So a bit of orange. Now a bit of cherry red. And a bit of white in the middle. We'll cover this in black. So I'll be using magazine paper again. So I'll rip it in half so it's a bit small so it's easier to use. Crunch it up. Place it on the painting. And lift it off. Just take your time when you're doing this, there's no rush. So we'll get the other piece, the other half of the magazine paper, place it on. And what I'm going to do is just going to go around and dab it in places, make a bit more texture. As you can see on the glossy paper, if you press too hard, you can bring some of the white back through from the paper, whereas the canvas doesn't really do that, because the first colour you put on the canvas soaks into the canvas. So if you pull too much paint off, if it was a red you put down first, it'd show the red through, whereas on the glossy paper it'd show the white because it doesn't soak into the glossy paper. So now we have the galaxies done. We're going to get the black and fill in all the background now. So we'll spray light next to the galaxy and light round your lid stencils. And also with the canvas, just remember to go around the sides as well while you're doing it. So light round your lid stencils. So I'm going to finish the background off there because I'm going to put some stuff in the foreground here. So we'll move on to a glossy paper. So we've got no sides on the glossy paper, so we don't have to worry about doing the edges on that. So that's a background done now, black. So what I might do is I just might mist a bit of colour, a bit of red either side of these galaxies. So when you're doing some misting, what you want to do is press the cap down real light so you just get like a mist effect. And move pretty quick across the painting. Put a bit there. I'll move on to this one. Might have a bit of orange here at the bottom. Put a bit of orange at the top first. Bit of colour. And I might just put a bit on the bottom here. So I quite like how that's looking. So now we're going to add some stars. So to make the stars, what we're going to do is spray some white on our fingers here and then flick it onto the sheet. So spray some white onto your fingers so it's like that. And then what you want to do is you want to flick it away from the painting a couple of times first so you get most of the white paint off your fingers. So you got something like this, and then flick the rest onto your sheet. That way you won't get big white blobs on your painting that don't look like stars. And a couple more. So that's the stars added to the painting. So now we're going to remove the lid stencils. So we'll take the weight off first. And now it's time for the good part, to reveal your planets. So I'll do the canvas one first. So we'll just lift these off carefully. So that's the first one. Quite like how that's turned out. Second, I quite like how them planets have turned out. Now we'll move on to the gloss card and lift them. So like I said, just take your time. So I like how them planets have turned out as well. I really like how this painting is looking so far. So now we have the background done, we'll move on to some stuff in the foreground. So what I'm going to do in the foreground is I'm going to do some water and then some rocks here and show you some highlights with the palette knife. So for this we're going to get the metal paint scraper, the decorator's tool. And what we're going to do is place it on the sheet where we're going to have the water. But ideally you want this to be dry before placing this on, because it'll leave like a line, it'll dig into the paint when you place it on. But I'm just going to go ahead and do this while the background's wet, so if it does leave a line you can see what I'm on about. So first of all, place the paint scraper on your painting where you want it. This will stop any overspray going onto the rest of the painting when you spray the paint here. So for this I'm going to do some red, orange and yellow, some water. So we'll do the red first. We'll do some red on the edges. So just press the cap lightly, so you don't want too much paint on there. So that's the red. Now we'll get some orange. Now we'll get a bit of white just down the middle. And then while I've still got this paint scraper on, what you could do is you could spray a bit of mist here, or you could leave it till after and redo it. But I'm going to do it now. So I think I might add a bit more orange here. And what you can do is get a bit of white and just do a bit of a mist. Just like that. So we'll take this paint scraper off. Place it there for a minute. And as you can see there, the Rustoleum is reacting with this canvas. Or there's a bit too much paint down and it started separating. But that's alright, because we're going to mix the paint up. So to make water, we're going to use our fingers and we're going to go back and forth like this. So we'll start at the top and we'll just go across to make some water. Just take your time when you're doing this. And also, if you get too much paint on your finger, just give it a wipe. So you've got no paint on it. Now you can always go over it again. But just watch how many times you go over it, because the more you go over it, the more chance of paint's going to do and mix up, and you lose all your colours. So I quite like how that's looking. So like I said, by doing the white mist there, you've gone a bit above there, the line. So you could always go back and do that in a minute. So I'm just going to leave that to dry while I move on to this one. So it's the same process. So we'll get the metal paint scraper, place it on the gloss paper where you want your water. I think I'll have it a bit higher. I think I'll have it there. So we'll get some red. Same process as doing the canvas. Then some orange. And a bit of white. So I'm going to leave a mist on there for this one. I'm just going to go straight and make the water first. So it's the same process. We'll get a finger and we'll rub it back and forth. But just watch out because the gloss paper might move. Could do with holding it down with something. I'm just going to put a palette knife there, I think. I'll just hold it down here in the corner. Like that. Doesn't matter about that because I'm going to put some rocks down there in a minute. So rub it back and forth. Like that, mix the paint up. So like I said, just wipe paint off your fingers so it's clean again. And there's no rush when you're doing this. Just take your time. So the paint's getting a little too dry there to move it anymore. So I'm going to leave that like that. And then we'll go back to this paint scraper. But there's a bit of a build up of paint there. So what I'm going to do is get a spare piece of magazine paper. And all I'm going to do is just give it a rub. Get some of the paint off so it's dry again. And then we're going to go back over here and just tidy this water line up. So place it on the sheet, the canvas again. Just get a bit of orange. And a bit of white. And lift it off carefully. So then that's the water done on the canvas. So I've just noticed, before I do that, there's a bit of a build up of paint here. On here, there's a bit too much paint. So when I put this scraper on, it's definitely going to dig into this paint. So let me just try and see if I can get rid of some of it. See, it's almost dry now, so. Just smoothed out a bit more. So what we'll do now is we'll go back and add the mist above the water. So this may dig in a bit, but if it does, I can show you the line I mean. Place a paint scraper there. We'll get some orange. And a bit of white. And lift it off carefully. It did stick a bit, but it's not really noticeable, the line where it's stuck. Just put this a bit more squarer. And this one a bit more squarer there. So now we have the water in place, we'll move on and add some rocks here at the bottom of the painting. So for this, I'm going to use a bit of orange. We'll just spray it. There, not much. Add a bit of red. And then we'll cover it with a bit of black. Nearly run out of black. So when you're holding your cans and the cans are low like that, sometimes you stop spraying. So all you have to do is get it upright and then spray it, and it'll start spraying again. So now we've got the red, orange and black down here for some rocks. Get another piece of magazine paper and we'll just crunch it up like that, so we make some crinkles in your paper so you can get some texture. And what we'll do is, you want to leave a bit of black just above it, and we'll just place it on to make some texture. I'll move over to this, get a clean piece. We'll do the same, so just leave a bit of black above it. So like that, I pulled a bit too much black off there, but that's alright. You could always go back over and add just a spot of black. And then just get your magazine paper again and just peel a bit off, so it gives you a bit more black on it. So I'll move on and do some highlights on here now with a palette knife, and I'll show you when you do your highlights on your canvas, because you've got colours already soaked into your canvas, that the first colour you sprayed onto the canvas will show up when you do your highlights. So what you want to do is, you want to get a spare piece of paper or something to wipe your palette knife as you're doing these highlights. What you want to do is, just on the black edge, just press down and follow it to do your highlights. I'll bring one there like that. The harder you press, the more the first colour you spray comes through. So as you can see, you have got a bit of white from the canvas showing, and you also got a bit of red, because that was the first colour I put down here at the bottom. And now just follow the black line in places. So just make sure you keep wiping your palette knife so you don't get a build up of paint on your palette knife. So I'll do for that side, and now we'll move on to this side. I can bring that down there a bit so it looks like it's a bit of an ump on there. We'll do the same, we'll go just round some of the black, your highlight here and there. So I'll do for the highlights on the canvas using the palette knife. As you can see, some of the white has shown back from the canvas, but you've got the bit of colour from the canvas here and there. So I'll leave that. That's done for now with the canvas highlights. And now we'll move on to the glossy paper and do the highlights on that. We'll get the orange first. And then a bit of red. and then some black. So we'll get some magazine paper, crunch it up a bit, and then just place it on where you're having your rocks. Just remember, leave a bit of black above it. So I like how that's looking. So I'll move on to this one. So I like that as well. So now we'll add the highlights and I think that one looks a bit too straight, so just get another piece of magazine paper. Just gonna add a bit of oomph to it in places. So that's nice straight. So we'll get a palette knife. So make sure you've got a bit of magazine paper, somewhere to wipe your palette knife as you're doing the highlights. And as you can see, when you're doing the highlights on the glossy paper, because none of the paint soaks into the gloss card, it brings a white back through. And the harder you press, it's moving a bit. I'm just trying to hold it here. So the harder you press, the more the white of the card comes through. So you press it light, and you can still leave some of the paint, but if you press it hard, it brings all the white through because the paint's not soaked in. So that'll do for that side. Now we'll move on to this one. So just follow the edge of the rocks. So that's the first highlight on. And we'll just go around some of these black. Back to this one. Just take your time when you're doing these. There's no rush. So there the highlights done, and as you can see on the glossy paper that the highlights are a bit more whiter. That's because none of the paint is soaked into the glossy paper. So when you scrape the paint off to do your highlights, you see more of the white, the glossy paper underneath. Whereas the canvas soaks the first paint you put down on. So for instance, you put red down first, you'll see a bit of red come through as you scrape for the highlights. So all in all, I'm quite happy with them highlights. So what I'm going to do now is just going to get the black, and I'm just going to blacken it at the bottom of each of these rocks. So just press it light, like a mist. I'll do the same here. So you don't want much. And the last thing we're going to do before the painting is finished is we'll get a palette knife and we're going to sign each of the paintings. So I'm going to sign it here where I've just put some black. And the same on here. So I'm really happy with the way these paintings have turned out. I like the texture on each of the planets, they look really nice. I like the galaxy in the background as well, the texture looks awesome on that, I quite like it, really happy with that. I like the rocks and the rocks highlights in the foreground and the mist just breaking the space and the water up. I'm happy with the way the water's turned out. I could have just added another bit more white here in the middle of each of the waters and just give it a bit of a rub to give a bit of a reflection, but I'm quite happy with the way they've turned out. And as you can see, there's not much difference between a canvas and the glossy paper. The only difference is from painting on canvas to glossy card is paint will soak into the canvas more where glossy card won't. Texture is a bit harder to do on a canvas due to the paint soaking into the canvas a bit. When doing highlights on the canvas, the paint that you first put down will show through, whereas on the glossy paper it won't do because it's had no paint soak into it. The canvas leaves a bit more of a rougher finish than the gloss paper. That's because the material the canvas is made out of isn't smooth and the gloss paper is smooth. And also a canvas costs a lot more than one sheet of glossy paper, but with a canvas you don't need to frame it or anything, you can put it straight on the wall. Whereas a glossy paper, to hang it on the wall you'd have to frame it. But apart from that, the canvas and the glossy paper work great for spray paint art. I hope you enjoyed watching this spray paint art tutorial and found the information in the video helpful. And if so, don't forget to give it a like. And if you're a new visitor to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and bell notification so you know when I upload new videos. And once again, thank you for stopping by and watching. I hope to see you all in the next spray paint art video. Have a great day, take care, and bye for now.